All right, well, welcome everyone to comparing the residential green rating systems. This course is brought to you by the Green Home Institute. The Green Home Institute is a nonprofit with a mission to empower people to make healthier and more sustainable choices in the renovation and construction of the places we live. My name is Brett Little. I'm the program manager here, and today I will also be the presenter of this course. So really excited to have you here. As always, our courses are approved for multiple continuing education units throughout various designations, as well as American Institute of Architects, Health, Welfare, and Safety, which may make it applicable to your state-based design or contractor license. Also, it's approved for our internal certified green home professional designation, including all 5 pillars in the case of this course, all 5 pillars of green that you need to maintain your CUs. As a reminder, this course is not a technical training course. This course is just covering how we look at the technical aspects of green rating systems and what you need to know about them. If you're looking for a technical course on green building, on the how, who, what, where, and why, you need to go back and look at our residential basics of residential green building course. It's a 7-part course, and so for those of you who are listening live, I'm posting a little link to that in the chat for you. For those of you on demand, there's a link in the description. Again, this course is also required as a baseline to your if you're getting your certified green home professional designation. It's also important to know we'll be referencing several energy modeling programs that are part of having a green certified project. But it's, again, important to know that we do not have time today. I know we've got a special extra hour today, but we don't have time today to go over these programs. So this is important for you to go back and watch our comparing residential energy rating and score so you can understand how those work, how they compare, and which ones you want to use for your green rating systems. And once again, this is also required if you are pursuing your designation for your certified green home professional. And I'm pasting it right into the chat there for you. And again, for those of you watching on demand in the future, there'll be a recording or a link that you can check out. So, all right. So the main rating systems we're going to be talking about today are Lead for Homes, Home Innovations National Green Building Standard, Enterprise Green Communities, Green Star Home Certification, and we'll reference LEED Operations and Maintenance, which can be used on multifamily, and we'll reference the Living Building Challenge once in a while too. It's important to know that before selecting a program, you probably want to know who's delivering these programs and if their values align with your values and the values of your clients. And so it'd be interesting in the chat if I was going to have a poll, but I guess I forgot to make it. But it'd be interesting in the chat if you could just drop in, have you used any of these programs before? Which ones you like? I'd love to hear from you. If you're watching the recording on this in the future, don't be shy. Put it into the chat on our YouTube channel or wherever you're watching. I want to hear from you. What if you're using? What programs do you like? Which ones do you see? Just want to hear, a little bit of feedback on that. So before we dive into the details, let's take a look at some of these programs at a high level. So first, we've got LEED, Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. Sometimes you hear people say Leeds. I think Leeds is a city in the UK, so that's very different. But LEED, L-E-E-D. This program is run in unison by the Green Business Certification Institute, GBCI, and the United States Green Building Council, USGBC. GBCI runs the certification side. USGBC does the education, credential maintenance, and the rating system maintenance. So sometimes we use GBCI and USGBC synonymously. I know I certainly am guilty of that, but it's very clear GBCI is running the certification program while USGBC is maintaining it, is the best way to look at it. LEED is a program that is consensus approved by members, so members get to vote, but it's important to know it is not an ANSI standard, so the public does not get to vote. That may be important to you and your clients. They lobby, the USGBC and GBCI collectively lobby the federal government for green building through increasingly, though increasingly they have less funds given to that in the past. So again, you want to support an organization who's doing that, that's up to you. They also have lots of members, lots of product sponsors. Green Home Institute is super excited to have been one of the original LEED for Homes providers in the country. We have certified or registered over 10,000 living units, certified over 10,000 living units, registered over 15,000 living units across the planet. And globally, USGBC LEED for Homes residential projects has 2 million registered across the planet. One thing important to know is that LEED breaks down its checklists and its program on rating system types. So you've got right now V4 versus V4.1. So V4 is allowed to be used in the US. Well, V4 is a global program. V4.1 for single family is global, but for multifamily, V4.1 can only be used outside of the US and Canada. But there are aspects of V4.1 you can incorporate in your project today in the US and Canada if you like it, but not all of them. It's also important to know that existing housing has a lot of exceptions in LEED for Homes. This program is mostly built for new builds and major gut rehabs, but there are some exceptions. And if you're trying to do more of a project that's based on existing operations, then you want to use operations and maintenance, which can certify multifamily buildings, I believe, all the way down to 20 units, maybe even lower now. And then also we have our friends, the second oldest program, Enterprise Green Communities. It's delivered by the Enterprise Community Partners. Enterprise Community Partners is made up of multiple different 501c3s, 501c4s, some for-profit subsidiaries, some rental businesses, and they have a foundation. So they are a massive conglomerate of many agencies put together. They advocate for affordable housing, attainable housing, more resilient housing. They lobby the federal government on these issues. They give grants. They even develop their own projects. They go out and develop them. They're very, very heavily tied to low-income housing tax credits. Their program is internal as far as how it gets updated. It's not public or membership based. However, they certainly seek a lot of input from their users. So we've been involved in that before. The way they break their program out is urban versus rural. So you get very different requirements if you're building more urban versus rural. Well, not very different, but some significant different requirements. And you have a different approach to the checklist. And then they also break their program out very substantially on new construction versus substantial renovation. So that's like impacting a big part of the building, shell, envelope, HVAC, versus just moderate renovation, which is just minor repairs. They have different rules set for what your goals are on the program, basically allowing you to have to do less things if your goal was just to do a moderate rehab. So that's important to know when you're looking at this program. You would select where you're at. And if you're in New York, they have a very special program for the people of New York. So I don't know what it is, but that's what I understand. And then also the Home Innovations Lab, National Green Building Standard. This is our second or third youngest program. And this is run by the Home Innovation Research Lab, which is, according to their website, an independent subsidiary of the National Association of Home Builders. NHAB is a lobbying group and a membership organization. They tend to lobby more for, how do I put this? Thoughtful approaches to the code, we'll say, on how we change our codes or slowing our code changes down. Let's just be honest. They have sponsors, and then the Innovations Lab does research on projects, which is really cool. So if you are working with a manufacturer who wants to know how green their product is, they will do research for you and certify it for Home Innovations Lab, which is pretty neat. They publish reports on building and all of that. And what's really cool, they like to tout, is their program is ANSI certified. Therefore, the entire public gets to weigh in if they're aware of it and they know about it. They get to weigh in and vote on and have a voice on the program. The way they break their program out is new versus existing. So they have a checklist for new construction, a checklist for renovation, and they have a small home checklist. And then they also break their program out on single family versus multifamily. So there's various different things you do depending on what your project type is. And then finally, if you can't tell, Green Star, this is run by the Green Home Institute. That's us. We are a 501c3 nonprofit. We're funded in majority by paid certification fees for green building certification. We have sponsors, if you don't know. We have members. We get grant funding to help with low-income housing. Really cool. We are certified platinum by GuideStar, so we always update and report and try to be as transparent with the way our business works as well. And the Green Star program is managed internally, but we do seek a lot of input from our members and our users on the program. So again, it's important to know that what are the programs that you want to choose to work with? What is important? What are your values? What are your beliefs? What are the values of your client? So your values could change, right? Based on what your client is paying you to do to some extent. And they might say, well, this is the goal we're trying to accomplish. So this is why you're trying to help them figure out, well, which rating system is trying to help them accomplish whichever goal. They're all tools. So what I get excited about is thinking about the future and innovation. That's what these rating systems are. They're just about building to a future standard that's not here yet. You know, the other day, one of our members was selling one of their LEED Platinum near net zero homes that I remember being involved in seeing and filming back in 2011 in Michigan. And that home is still built above most of the codes in the country besides California, you know, 10 years ago, built to a future standard. So that's what this is. It's excitement. It's building to the future. We can do it now. We don't have to wait. We don't have to wait for the code to tell us to do it. Let's do it now. That's why I get excited and do wake up to do these things. And I hope you will too. And these programs give you the guide to do that. And then also these programs are a tool. They're a resource. Use the resources, the links, go find the link, get the checklist, get the manual. These, you know, people, they come together, these building scientists, these green building scientists from all backgrounds, all parts of the country and the planet, they come together, they put these programs together, they work with people like you to give these resources. So you don't have to say, how do I build a greener home? You don't have to come up with new things. I mean, we all have great ideas and we want to share them, but you know, you can use these resources now. A lot of them are free. You can go download the checklist and just see, and get the manuals and get the guidelines and figure out a way to build your project better. And the checklist, I think, even if you're not certifying, I would still challenge you to utilize the checklist on your next project, or even use it on go back and look at a project you just completed, run it through one of these green building checklists just to see how you would score. Use it as an exercise over the holiday break, see how you're scoring, see if it makes sense to run your next real project through it, but use it as a guide to help, communicate your sustainability goals. And then finally, get the word out, right? No one is doing a green building project and then just moving on and not wanting to be excited, right? It's a lot of work to submit all that documentation and to build beyond the code and to put the budget together. So we want you to toot your own horn, to celebrate your success. Get the word out, do a green building tour. We'll work with you on that probably. Get a plaque, put it up, put a virtual plaque up, show off your success, and just, really that's how we inspire others. We know that most people go solar because they see their neighbors going solar. The same thing for green building. You see your neighbors going green building, you see a green building being built. It helps inspire the community to move forward. And then finally, I'm not naive. I understand that you're getting a big tax credit for most of you. For example, in Michigan and many other states, the low-income housing tax credit programs require you use one of these green certifications. In Michigan, it's required. And then the next level up, you have to do zero energy, which we'll talk about. And then the next level up, you have to do passive house to make your bid competitive. And then there's also our friends in the city of Cincinnati. You get a potentially up to a 20-year property tax abatement, which is thousands and thousands of dollars to build a LEED certified home or multifamily building. So we understand that there's money here. We know in the city of St. Paul, if you do a Green Star certified multifamily building, it's tied into their tax credit program. St. Paul, Minnesota. We know in the state of Michigan, there's a bill circulating now in the House of Representatives to give out $7,500 for, you know, a National Green Building Standard Emerald or LEED Platinum home, right? I don't know if it'll pass, but anyway, the incentives, the tax credits, we understand they're out there. We know that's a lot of these projects are pursuing those. And, you know, that's why you want to get ahead of the curve, start building to these now. So when these tax credits do come out, you'll be ready to be able to help you and your clients claim them. All right. So all of these programs have, you know, categories, and, you know, they all have different names. So what we've done is we've said, okay, what are all these things have in common? They have something what we call the 5 pillars of green building, right? So if you went through our basics of green building, we talked about the technical side of each of these things, the how and the why and the what. So what we're going to do today is we're going to look at the 5 pillars of green building and how each of the green rating systems categories apply together. And we're then going to compare each one of them. Is it required? Is it a point, you know, in the system, going through the lens of this 5 pillars. And for the most part, they're kind of all the same in all of the rating programs. So we've just, like I said, we've taken the time to say which one fits usually into, you know, which category. And again, as a reminder, this is not a technical training. I'm not going to sit here and explain to you the benefits and how to achieve ASHRAE 62.2 ventilation. It's very important, especially with COVID, but I'm not going to do that. I don't have time. Maybe we'll get into Q&A. So again, go back to that basics course, and that's where you'll get the technical information. Here, I'm just saying, here's the rules, what you need to do, and here's how it would fit into whichever system you're trying to use. So first, the thing that's important to know is you have requirements versus choice. So on the bottom of this list here, you have more choice. On the top of this list, you have more mandatory things to do. So Home Innovations Lab, it is a massive a la carte menu of choice. If you love making lots of decisions and having lots of choice, then that is the program for you. You're going to spend a lot of time looking through all sorts of things. I mean, how many stripes are in the parking lot? Go out and count them, and you can get some points if there's less stripes, right? I mean, it's like that. It's, if you like that, if your clients want that, people tell us, oh, I've got all these great green building ideas. I think we should get points for this and for that. Then NGBS Home Innovations is their program because they get to make all those choices. LEED is less so. There are a lot of choices, but there's quite a bit of prerequisites. Once you hit your baseline foundational prerequisites, then you get to start heading off in the direction you want to go. So maybe water and air quality is important to your clients, and you just don't do much with energy. So once you get the foundation down, you can head in one of those other directions. And I should have said with Home Innovations Lab, that actually is the case if you try to get up to a higher level. So you have to achieve points in all 5 pillars of green and home innovations. And you have to achieve more points if you want to get to higher levels. So in that case, you get to choose how you want to get there, but you have to cover all 5 pillars more and more so. Whereas in LEED, you can start putting all of your eggs into one basket to some extent. Let me give you an example. A net zero home in LEED is only going to give you enough points to certify. So you can't be LEED Platinum by just having a zero energy home. So it's important to know that you still have to pursue the other categories. As far as how Green Star works, we actually could even be a little bit higher up on the list. And so with that being said, we and I'm wondering, oh no, I'm using the right. Yeah. So anyway, we basically have a list of mandatory things you have to do depending on what level you get to, right? There's actually really no choice in Green Star at all, unless you want to get badges. And those badges could be air quality, zero energy. You get to choose which badges you want. But you have a list of requirements you have to do to go from basic to silver to certain. That way we have a uniform standard and we know if a home is gold. If you look at a LEED Gold home, it could have all sorts of different features. If you look at a LEED Gold or a Green Star Gold home, you would know all the features for the most part, besides the badges. And so that's important to know. And then Enterprise Green, it just has tons and tons of requirements. It's basically just a program full of requirements. And then from there, you can make choices to build points, but the points don't get you anything. It's not like you can be enterprise certified, silver, gold, platinum. There's nothing like that. It's just enterprise plus points. So what happens is a lot of these low-income housing tax agencies will say, okay, in order to be more competitive in your tax credit, we want you to be enterprise plus 60 points. So they get to make those rules up. But that's all it is it's just a massive list of requirements and then a small point chasing game after that. So that's basically some of the differences. And again, what I see in this is that who is your client? Is your client someone who's like, just tell me what to do and let's get it done? That's enterprise client. That's on the low income side anyway. If your client, and I should have made that point earlier, is enterprise only certifies low income housing projects. They won't do market rate. And if your client is someone who's like, I want to make all these decisions and spend a lot of time making choices, then NGBS is theirs. And then there's the middle ground, between the rating systems. All right, well, we have a lot to cover. We're going to get into the energy pillar, talk about energy conservation. Again, as a reminder, we're not going to spend time on the energy efficiency rating programs through this session. We have a whole nother session you can check out on comparing those. We're just going to briefly reference them. And moving forward throughout this course, the way this is going to work is you're going to see the logos. If you see the logos at the top, that is telling you the credit we're talking about, the green feature is a requirement in that rating system. If you see it at the bottom, it's telling you it's points, extra things, it's a choice. If you see it in the middle, it's kind of like there's a variation. And if you see it tilted like this, you'll see a lot of them this kind of tilted over. That basically means there's another whole variation we need to sometimes discuss. And a lot of times those variations are basically how the rating systems look at these in renovations versus new builds, because they give you lots of different pathways when you're doing that. LEED would probably be the one that does that least. So here are the programs that require energy rating scores and energy rating labels. LEED and Enterprise Green communities require an energy rating score or label, such as the HERS index or 90.1. Green Star requires an energy rating label. The reason Enterprise Green and LEED are kind of tilted is because there is pathways through the multifamily new construction program, through the New Buildings Institute program that do allow a prescriptive approach. What's important to know is if you decide to take the prescriptive approach, you will get 0 points in either of these systems. So if you're trying to certify above a higher level, you won't get rewarded. Even if your prescriptive approach is aggressive, you can only get so far. So performance is important to get advanced in these rating systems. Home Innovations Lab allows multiple energy rating pathways based on cost and energy use savings, but it doesn't require it. So Home Innovations is one of the few programs that still allows a prescriptive pathway. So you could sit down without a formal energy rater, and you could go and calculate and type in their checklist, U values for windows, R values for insulation, air leakage, duct leakage, HVAC, COPs for your heat pump. You want to use a heat pump, right? Appliances, lighting, solar, you name it. You can punch all that in. You don't need to have the energy rater there, and you can get your score that way through their system. So the HERS index, usually is used on the low-rise buildings, 5 stories or under. So again, for LEED, it's important to remember that, you have to have around a HERS index of 70 just to get certified in LEED, and then you score more points as you go lower. And even if you hit net zero in LEED, you still are only at the basic level of certification of LEED. It's not like an instant platinum. The other thing you would need to know here is that NGBS and Enterprise Green use a variation of the HERS index called the ERI, Energy Rating Index. Enterprise doesn't use HERS anymore, but ERI is nearly the same thing as it. Home Innovations allows you to use ERI or HERS. And just to give you some rough estimates here, if you're using Home Innovations certification, their bronze is equivalent to 70, silver to 60-ish, gold to 55, and emerald to 50. That's the equivalence. If you understand HERS talk, then that's what your equivalence is. And then Green Star, from a HERS perspective, wants you to be at 50 at bare minimum, and then you can score higher levels from your energy use reduction from there. The other thing to know is that both Home Innovations Lab and LEED have something called the baseline home or the baseline unit. It's sort of this made up average home, this made up average unit, and you can run energy models through the REM rate or Ecotrope or HERS software to be better than the baseline and score your points that way. From LEED's perspective, that works out really well if you have smaller homes, or if you're going all electric in an area that has really low gas rates and really high electric rates, because what they care about is less about the rates and more about the carbon savings. So a lot of times your HERS rating will ding you if you're in a territory with high, like where I live, high electric rates, low gas rates. Our HERS ratings don't look so nice when we switch between gas and electric, even though we know the electric is more energy efficient. We know the electric is going to reduce carbon emissions. Doesn't matter. So the LEED energy budget kind of overcomes that problem that we've seen in practice. Now, for those of you doing mid-rise and multifamily, you understand the 90.1% rating system, right? So first we've got LEED V4 that sits at requiring you to be, at or better, I think maybe 15% better than the 2010 ASHRAE 90.1. Enterprise Green wants you to be at 2013. And then LEED V4 multifamily, non-US, non-Canada, so outside of the North America, wants you to kick in at 2016. And then you start getting points from there. As far as Home Innovations Lab, you can use ASHRAE for Home Innovations Lab, because ASHRAE will produce an energy or cost savings, and you can pick which either pathway is more beneficial to your project for your point system in Home Innovation. So it's important to know, So, and then for Green Star, you can use ASHRAE if you're doing a large multi-family mid-rise building. We have one underway now. But in our case, we only allow you to use energy savings and not cost savings in that regards. And then Energy Star Homes certification is a foundation, a baseline to a lot of these programs. So Enterprise requires an Energy Star certification, at least on their new builds. LEED requires you do everything stopping short of certification. So the one thing, you just submit the documentation, you make sure everything's in place, and you don't have to have the certified HVAC contractor. Home Innovations, on the other hand, actually just is like, we don't really care about Energy Star certification. You can use it as a pathway to just get bronze, and that's fine with us, but that's about it. And then Green Star doesn't care about it at all, and there's no connection between the two other than, great job. As far as plumbing fixtures, so run times in your plumbing, or how far your runs are from your water heater to your faucets, or if you have recirculation loops, or if you do water testing. So that's where you turn on the hot water and you mark a timer to see how long it takes water to heat up. That's a way to validate how efficient it is. Or pipe wrap. You can get points for that in LEED, Home Innovations Lab, and Green Star. The points for this for Home Innovations NGBS are actually in the water category, not energy, just so you know. And there's also some additional points for tankless water heaters. Still living in the old days. So. And then getting a home solar ready. We suggest all homes and new builds today, if they're not adding solar, be ready for solar. It's just inevitable, makes it easier, cheaper to install. So those are just additional points in all of the rating systems. Having the certified HVAC contractor get involved. For enterprise, that's basically required on new builds. For LEED and Green Star, they don't have to be EPA certified. They can be NATE certified. And then for Green Star, even further, we're certifying HVAC 2.0. We'll accept them, or certified green home professionals. So if you have your HVAC contractors go through this program, they can be certified for us. And then as far as, Home Innovations Lab, I believe they give out some additional points if you have a certified HQITO on staff. And then let's get into some prescriptive measures. Again, reminder, only National Green Building Standard allows you to go prescriptive for the most part, other than some variations. And if you do go prescriptive, they require grade 1. So it's like a perfect insulation install like you see here. LEED, Enterprise, and Green Star require a grade 1 only if you don't have exterior insulation, similar to the rigid you're seeing here on the left side of the photo. On the outside, though, if you have rigid, then you only need to be grade 2. But obviously, we want everyone to install as best as they possibly can. Ducts. So for LEED, we want to see all your duct runs be fully sealed. They can't be duct panned into the joist. For Enterprise Green, that's only required on new builds. On Home Innovations Lab, that's only required on new builds. And on Green Star, we have a variation where your supplies have to be done on, I believe, silver. Your returns, both returns and supplies, on gold. And then all of them, I believe, we'll be updating that to platinum. And if you have no ducts at all, then as we say, no ducts, no worries. So, okay. And then duct leakage testing, which is always a pain and always derails a lot of green building programs. LEED requires you hit the Energy Star target of 6% leakage. Enterprise requires you do that on new builds, not renovations. Home Innovations, they don't care about duct leakage, just give you points. Green Star, we don't care about duct leakage. We just, it's just, again, it's a component of the energy rating that you do. The leakier your ducts you are, the worse your energy rating is going to be. Here, our friend LEED AP Operations and Maintenance makes its first debut. So I will say, in this case, we're talking about comparing, having data and sharing it with a third party, such as one of these organizations. Having energy use comparison data, having data that monitors at hourly intervals, or having data that can compare your portfolio of buildings. Just any ways we can compare and share utility data. For Home Innovations and LEED, there's extra points. Enterprise mandates this as a certain component or percentage of the number of units there are. And AP Operations and Maintenance for LEED, you get your energy points based on how you compare to the other multifamily buildings in the industry. So you have to report out every 3 years your energy use, and you have to keep it at a low amount to score certain more points or score higher levels, silver, gold, platinum of LEED operations and maintenance. So it's not based on energy models, but it's actually based on this data on how you do that on real world data. And then to end it off, net zero, it's the trend. We all know it is. So how does net zero fit in the green building programs? How are they tied together and what's going on? So first we've got LEED Zero and National Green Building Standard green badge plus zero energy on the bottom left there. They require a basic certification level of their program, just the lowest level. And then you can snag one of these badges. And you can snag the badge by putting up lots of solar, which we hope you will do. But you can also get the badge just by buying renewable energy credits or some combination of solar, community solar, and renewable energy credits. So, basically that's on average about, we're looking at, $100 to $200 a unit. So the more energy efficient your unit is, the less you would need to buy, right? So the more efficient it is, we're looking at more of the sort of $100 a unit, and then if you're looking at like a single family home, it's probably more like $200 or $300, depending on if it's a passive house built home, versus a leakier home. The other thing that's important to know is that for LEED, you only need to buy 1 year's worth of RECs to match the actual utility use, whereas NGBS, my understanding, is as of January 1st, 2022, you need to buy 2 years. So you can double that price to get into their program. Now they could change that, but that's what I was last told. Now going up further, we've got the Enterprise Green Communities program. Now they require that you achieve a DOE zero energy ready home, which we talked about in our last class. That requires you get a HERS score of like 35, 40-ish, that you meet IECC, I think, higher energy efficiency standards, that you have some recirculation loops on your water heating, and that you're zero energy ready and Indoor Air Plus certified. So there's all those items you have to do. Then you can tack on some solar, or you can just buy RECs. But you need to do all of that to achieve the net zero pathway in enterprise. And then going further, we have our program, the Zero Energy Capable Certified Program. This one is a badge for Green Star, but you can also use it in tandem with LEED or Enterprise or whatever you want. We don't care. You just have to get a baseline green certification, and then you have to produce on-site as much energy as you consumed over the course of a year. But you can't buy RECs. And then taking it all the way to the max level is the debut here of our friends over at the International Living Future Institute, the Living Building Challenge. In this case, all projects must supply 105% of their project energy needs through on-site renewable energy on a net annual basis. So again, remember, our program is 100, theirs is 105. And it has to be done without combustion. So all electric, and all projects must submeter major energy uses besides single family. However, single family must develop a residential project method to understand and troubleshoot energy use, whatever that means. And a project's, and going beyond this, if that wasn't hard enough, which we recommend doing, but you have to also document the embodied carbon from your construction, and you have to offset it either through carbon sequestration or just buy more solar for the project. On top of that, all projects must develop and incorporate resiliency, which is a really good idea as the weather gets worse. And you have to be able to maintain habitability in the building for 1 week during a massive grid outage. Think about Texas, what happened in Texas just a year ago when it was cold. Or you have to participate and support a local community disaster program as well. So that's basically, sort of our approach to net zero and how far you have to go, depending again on what your goals are. So that concludes energy. We're going to get into health, but I just wanted to see before we move on if there's any questions you have for me or clarifications on energy pillars with any of these programs. So health, right? The health pillar. And health is so much more than air quality, but we know right now air quality is top of mind to keep us all safe. So we're going to spend a lot of time. Most of these programs spend a lot of time on air quality, but health also includes sound quality, light quality, mental health. All of these things can be addressed with green building strategies. So we will get into a few of some of those other health related items and how they're relevant to the green rating systems. So first off, we have local ventilation. LEED requires a 50, intermittent CFM bath fan and 20 continuous, and then 100 CFM on the range hood, third party tested. And if you have over 400 CFM on the range, you need to have instant makeup air coming right into the kitchen to make up for it. Green Star is pretty much the same as LEED, though there is a trade-off in our basic level of certification. If you use an electric stove or an induction stove, which is proven to put off less PM 2.5, you can do away with requiring the range hood, at least on the basic level. But on the silver level, our slides are going a little crazy. On the silver level, you'd need to do the range hood. For Enterprise Green, it's the same as LEED, but that's only on new builds. For renovation, it's points to do the bath fan exhaust and the kitchen hood exhaust. For home innovations, it's required on the bath fan to hit those CFM levels, but it's only points for the range hood. So NGBS does not really care much about range hood ventilation as LEED and all the other programs do. And even doing the 400 CFM makeup air requirement on ranges that are really large is extra points in NGBS. It's also important to know that I can't find any indication or proof that actual testing is required and that you couldn't just submit the fan flow rates. I don't know. I can't tell when I read the standard whether that's true or not. So you'd have to check with your NGBS rater. Then going into whole unit ventilation, we're looking at ASHRAE 62.2, 2010, or 2016. LEED V4 requires 10. LEED V4.1 requires 16. Green Star Silver requires 16. Enterprise Green Communities requires 10 on new builds, points on existing. And then Home Innovation gives you points on 2010. So the other thing to know is, again, LEED, Green Star, and EGC require third-party testing to verify that the ventilation system is actually delivering this, whereas Home Innovations Lab, I can't really tell. It might just be okay to show them the settings. I don't know. And then as far as occupancy controls, such as humidistats in the bathroom, 20-minute timers, runtime continuous, LEED will require you, if you're using the bath fan as an exhaust ventilation strategy for your whole unit or whole home, you are required to give the users control over that. So that is a requirement. But as far as points go, there's some additional points if the bath fan is got one of these features in LEED as well as Home Innovations Lab. And then taking it to a next step, if again you have balanced ventilation with heat or energy recovery ventilation, LEED gives you a bonus point that you can confirm that it's operating within a 10% threshold of the ASHRAE standard that you're going after. So it can't be 10% over and it can't be 10% under. And then as far as Enterprise Green and Home Innovations Lab, these are just points. And as far as Green Star goes, you actually are required to use an ERV or HRV at the gold level. It's mandatory for all gold level homes. And there are air quality badges you can get through Green Star 2 for doing this. For those of you doing multifamily with common space, LEED requires an ASHRAE 62.2 ventilation calculation be done and ideally approved in the design stage. It has to be approved by GBCI, which is pretty rare. Green Star requires on the higher level, I forget which one it is now, for multifamily buildings that 62.1 or 62.2 calculations are done, and Home Innovation Lab gives you an additional point for those. And then looking at filtration, LEED and Green Star require a bare minimum of a MERV filter of 8, unless you have mini splits or radiant floors. Then you get a MERV 10 gets you extra points in LEED v4.1. And then 11 is required if you live in a non-attainment or very polluted zone with bad air quality. For National Green Building Standard, they require an 8, or they don't require anything, should I say. They give you 2 points for having 8 to 13 and 3 points for having a MERV 14 or higher. And then Green Star requires that you have a MERV 10 on silver level, 13 on gold, and 16 on platinum. And it's also important to know NGBS and Green Star require that a pressure drop test be done to ensure that you're not messing up the pressure of the system, which is very important because these larger medium filters can drain the life and damage the equipment, especially on older systems. For your water, for water heating safety, Green Star requires that existing naturally drafted water heaters be tested or be sealed combustion, or ideally a heat pump or all electric at silver. NGBS, and that's also LEED. LEED requires they all be sealed combustion, and so does Enterprise Green. National Green Building Standard requires that if it's not located in a condition, that it's not located in a conditioned space, and if you seal or power vent the gas, you get extra points. And you get extra points for heat pump or all electric, but ironically, they're less extra points than gas. So you actually get more points for using a gas water heater that's sealed than you do for using a heat pump in NGBS. And that's not prescriptive. That's just another whole standalone set of air quality points. For LEED and Home Innovations Lab, there are a bunch of extra credits for having zoning, for having supply airflow testing, pressure balancing testing, radiative systems, room by room controls, all these different higher end features you can do with your HVAC. One thing I'll point out is that LEED actually just gives you points if you build what I would say right size. So single family homes that are 800 square feet or less, or multifamily units that are 1,200 square feet or lower, automatically get these points, because I think the justification there is that you can get that airflow in these smaller units. You don't need to have all the room by room control stuff and testing going on because the units are just inherently smaller. Radon, very important issue, second cause of lung cancer, second to smoking. And, even in zones that are not designated high risk by EPA, we find all sorts of issues. So we always say, just put the radon system in. I put one in for $500. It's cheaper on a new build. LEED and Enterprise test on rehabs in zone 1. It's required in zone 1 to have the slab mitigation strategies, and then a passive system in place that you could then have the junction box and put the fan in if the client has a problem. Green Star requires you test all your projects, even new builds, before you can certify, and then install the system as well, or you can use active radon monitoring as well. So we allow some different pathways there. Home Innovations, Zone 1, passive plus slab. They've got some really robust testing protocols in their checklist. I really like them if you really want to look into all that stuff. A lot of details there. And then NGBS gives you points if you can install these in zone 2s and 3s. All right, compartmentalization. So we know when we build tight units, it saves energy, but it also protects people in their units. We know there's some studies to show that COVID is spreading between multifamily leaky units in units. So that's very dangerous. So even before COVID, we said, you know, you never know what someone's cooking or smoking or whatever, and it gets pulled up in between units and ruins the air quality for everybody. So for LEED, we are looking at either, we're looking at metrics called CFM at 50 per enclosure square feet, so the walls. So there's lots of calculations you have to do there. So for LEED, we're looking at 0.3 or 0.23. So 0.3 for smaller units, 0.23 for bigger units as a requirement, and then 0.15 for extra points. For Green Star, we're looking at 0.15 for certified, 0.4 for silver, 0.23 for gold, 0.15 for platinum. For enterprise, this is in the energy section, not the health section. And it depends on which version of Energy Star you're using. The other thing that they do is if you've got an existing building and you're concerned about hitting their 0.4 target, I believe it is, they allow you to do a 20% air leakage reduction across the board as an alternative approach. But I think it's 0.4 on new construction. Home Innovations, in the energy section, you can do a visual inspection for, you don't even have to do blower door testing. You can just do a visual air sealing inspection. And there's some different rules for 4+ story multifamily buildings that are out there. And overall, if you're using the blower door test, you want to hit like a 4 air changes per hour for NGBS, but they're not looking at 50 per enclosure like the other programs are for this. And you can just get more points in the prescriptive route if you can get your air leakage numbers down. So they're not really looking at compartmentalization in that program. For all the programs, we are, you know, weary of attached garages, carbon monoxide, other pollutants getting in. So you got to make sure you have all the garage sealants in place, weather stripped in the doors. You got to make sure there's carbon monoxide detectors connected to garages, exhaust fans potentially in some of the bigger units. And as far as NGBS and Green Star go, those stringencies change depending on whether it's new versus existing, because there's only so much you can do on an existing building. So those do change for those, but for NGBS or for LEED and enterprise, there's not there's not waivers set aside for renovations. It's pretty strict. All right, getting into products. So there's all sorts of green attributes for products, and there's health, and then there's sort of what we call our material sustainability. So from our health sustainability, we're looking at low VOCs, no VOCs, and then also certified low or no VOCs. So LEED gives you points for certified low VOCs. NGBS gives you a huge a la carte menu of different certifications or pathways for low VOC sealants and paints and products. Green Star gives you like a badge for obtaining a bunch of them. And Enterprise Green actually requires that at least your sealants and your paints are low VOC through some various different, and your flooring and all of that. So they actually require that. On cabinetry, we're looking at like KCM certifications, all those kinds of things. For humidity control, LEED will give you points for keeping humidity out, but won't help you out. And we've tried, if you are trying to address dry air like we have now in the winter, they don't give you any points for that. Enterprise Green gives you points for humidity control Home Innovation gives you a bunch of different points for humidity control, and they give you bonus points for having more ongoing consistent monitoring of humidity, which is pretty cool. And then Green Star has humidity control requirements at higher levels, as well as some monitoring that we're going to be incorporating at the higher levels as well. So like I said, it's not all about air quality. Sound quality is huge to our health and our mental well-being. And so LEED v4.1 single family anyway can give you some points for keeping sound and testing it and making sure it's low in the living spaces and in the bedrooms. Same, Green Star has a sound quality testing requirement at the higher levels. Enterprise Green gives you some points. And NGBS looks at soundproof rooms, but they don't go as far as testing, which I thought was interesting. So that is how they fit into the Home Innovations Lab. And then accessibility is a huge part of health, right? We always ask the question, if a building isn't accessible or a home's not accessible to people in need, is it really truly green? And I don't know the answer. It's just a question we always like to ask. So LEED gives you some points in for going beyond ADA. Green Star, we're building out some zero-step certification protocols. Home Innovations Lab, I mean, they just do such a fantastic job of giving you all these resources and ideas to make sure, you know, people who need help, and those don't necessarily need to be people with a medical condition. Even, you know, younger kids or someone who's not paying attention can easily fall down the stairs and get hurt. So giving you all sorts of ideas to make homes safer and healthier from an accessibility standpoint. I really like that program where they have all of these pathways laid out and they clearly spell it out. I really like that about their program. Enterprise Green requires that you go beyond ADA and a certain percentage of your units and lays out some very specific things you have to do. And then if you go further, they have some additional points for you as well. And water quality is becoming a big problem. Here in Michigan, we are the canary in the coal mine, as I like to say, for the problems that are probably facing our entire country and our planet. We've got lead in Flint. We've got PFAS all over the state, and it's bad. And then we've got all sorts of other issues here in Michigan. And we know that's happening all over the country. It just hasn't come to light yet. And so we know that if we can help make our clients' water better, safer, and the green programs, rating systems are rewarding for that. For Green Star, we're going to actually have it be mandatory at the platinum level to have some water quality. And the water quality can be localized depending on what the issues are. Of course, you know, if you've got PFAS, you're talking about something very different than if you just got a lead issue. But there's additional points. Enterprise requires that you remove lead pipelines, and they also require on larger projects with cooling towers that you have a Legionella plan in place, which is getting really bad in buildings that were abandoned during COVID. Really nasty stuff out there, and hospitals, unfortunately. And then air quality monitoring is becoming a huge part of the future of green building programs. LEED has some testing protocols. So it's not really ongoing. It's more like one-time testing, but they have some testing protocols where you can pick up an additional point. For Green Star, I think we're going to require ongoing air quality monitoring of certain air quality metrics at the gold level. And then taking it even higher, LEED AP operations and maintenance and living building challenge actually require that you hit certain target thresholds of multiple VOC types, and you name it. O&M requires you do a survey of occupants on how they feel about their space, but they also require that you have some air quality metrics reviewing reviewing CO2 and TVOCs, and keeping those below some certain thresholds, if you will. And then access to nature, natural views, natural lighting. It really helps our mental health and our well-being. Green Star is going to have some badges for that. And then Living Building requires that people have access to nature and views of nature and connection to mental health and well-being. And Green Star is actually one of the first ever and still only systems that recognizes electromagnetic frequency, or what they call now EMR, electromagnetic radiation reduction strategies in new and existing homes. We give out an EMR badge. We're working to build that out right now on the platform. But this is important. There are people around the world that are very highly sensitive to these things, that can't live in certain homes because of this. And even those who aren't sensitive to this issue, it can affect your sleep quality or mood without you even knowing it. So there's simple things we can do, and we talk about it in the basics of building, and then we'll have a whole list of things you can do to achieve the EMR reduction badge. So we're going to move on from health to the materials pillar. But before we do that, are there any specific questions or thoughts that I can answer? And if you're listening to this in the future of the recording, do put your thoughts down in our comment box or chat too. We want to hear from you, even though you're not here live. I still do try to answer those. So let me know before we move on, and then we'll get into the next section. All right, so moving on to the materials pillar now. So again, materials looks at what all the components of your building are made out of, where they came from, where they're going. It's looking at durability, and it's looking at waste management reduction. So first, durability, right? And in some ways, we should always start here, because if we can't keep water out of our buildings, what good is our fancy energy efficiency features and ventilation systems? They're all for nothing if our building is rotting. So you almost have to start here. A lot of this stuff is intuitive. It's built into code. And really, it's more of a question, if not if, but when the building will ultimately fail. And how do we push that further into the future? So all of these programs require you, to some extent, to look at keeping water out, flashing, gutters, drainage, downspouts, moving things away. And they all require it to some extent differently as to whether you're doing a new build or an existing, or whether you're single family or whether you're multifamily. And so you just have to kind of look at all their different requirements and how in depth you get with those different types of requirements. But they all have durability measures that are in place that need to be validated and verified on site by the general contractors. Now coming inside, we're looking at keeping carpeted surfaces or moisture-laden surfaces away from bathrooms, away from entry points, and away from kitchens. So LEED requires that. NGBS requires that short of the entryway. They don't mention it there. Enterprise and Green Star requires it during the renovation process, or at certain types of entryways, like not slider entryways, but existing entryways on new construction. So behind the shower and tub surround, you can get mold back there. And so you've got LEED requires an ATSM certified backer board or no backer board, just as shower insert. Same with Enterprise Green. NGBS requires tile backing in wet areas must carry ASTM. So they only care about tiling, I guess, as opposed to the specific backer board requirement. And then Green Star requires that you do this on new construction and anytime you're changing out the bathroom. As far as leak prevention, you're talking about floor drains. You're talking about catchment drains under tank water heaters and washers in and or above living space. So Enterprise and LEED and Green Star all require this. And as far as washers go, they'll allow you to use steel braided hoses instead of the drain pan, which is cheaper. NGBS seems to be silent on this entirely. Getting into our materials. So it's a misnomer that still gets spread that LEED requires you to use FSC certified wood. That is not a requirement. LEED requires you not to use illegal wood being brought in from outside of, below the Tropic of Capricorn and all that. So if you are using wood down from like South America and those areas, in that case, it does have to be FS certified. But if you're using North American lumber, then they don't care. There's just extra points for it. Same with Green Star. NGBS gives you a whole a la carte pathway for certified wood. SFI is the big one everybody knows and all that. So they don't have any requirements and they give you extra points for using some sort of certification. And Enterprise Green is silent on that one. Thinking of all the materials that go into our homes, walls, trim, drywall, windows, doors, siding, roofing, all of them can be more sustainable. So basically, if you can think about, is it recycled pre and post consumer? Is it bio-based? Is it does it have an extended producer warranty on it? Is it cradle to cradle certified? Does it have a life cycle assessment, LCA? Does it have an EPD with reduced embodied energy? All these different things you could think of for these materials. You can snag a bunch of points for in all of these different rating systems. They give you points for those kinds of things. Where one stands out is the Living Building Challenge, where they do have pretty strict requirements for these kinds of things. And so in ILFI, they're looking at 20% or more of your materials construction budget comes from within 500 kilometers. 30% must come within from 1,000 kilometers of the construction site. And then an additional 25% of the materials must come within 500,000. The remaining 25% can come from wherever. So again, you're trying to source more locally. There's points for that in the other systems. And then you've got, the use of like certified wood, of course, certified stone. If you're using stone, you have to use, they're looking at making sure that there's no red list materials. They're looking at making sure it has one of their declare certifications on the product labels to make sure it doesn't have toxic chemicals in it. You name it. One of the biggest challenges to the Living Building Challenge is vetting all of these materials and going through and making sure that they are fully sustainable and more are supporting local and regional economies. And then framing. If we can reduce the amount of framing we do, we can use less lumber and we can fit more insulation and have a better, so this ties into energy very well. We discussed this in our basics course. So LEED, Green Star, Home Innovations. Green Star actually will have an advanced framing badge. LEED and Home Innovations Lab will give you additional points for whole list of advanced framing features that you can use. Waste. So for waste, we are looking at LEED and Home Innovations Lab giving you points for diverting construction waste. And LEED gives you an additional 1 point for diverting 50% of demo. Enterprise requires that you either provide a waste plan that diverts 75% of materials, or you either have to pick two from an a la carte menu, recycle 100% of your cardboard, recycle 100% of your drywall, metal, concrete, asphalt, insulation, carpet, or develop a comprehensive waste framing plan. So you got to pick from 2 of those on that list, and then you get additional points for going beyond that. Lead O&M on the operation side requires that you do waste diversion audits and hit certain waste diversion targets to get higher levels of lead operation and maintenance certification. So again, it's not on the build side, but it's on the ongoing side. So if you're working with your tenants, you have to work with them and educate them to recycle, to compost, and to, you know, reduce their waste to get to higher levels. In O&M, it's actually required on that end of things. Living building challenge, you have to basically recycle nearly 100% of everything. It's, you know, you get some different numbers, but they go from 95 to 100%, depending, like 100% cardboard. So it's pretty aggressive. And also you have to do, if you're doing a demo project for ILFI, 80% of that demo has to be recycled. So it's a great target. It's a good idea. It's just, it's fairly aggressive. So that is it for the materials section. We're going to now move into water. Are there any questions on materials before we move on? All right. So our second to last pillar is water. Water conservation, water catchment, you name it, water in all of its forms. We need to reduce our water, which reduces water bills are going up. And also, as I learned, I think in the city of Grand Rapids, we were able to confirm the average family probably generates 16 pounds of carbon from processing all the water that they use, which isn't a huge amount of carbon, but it adds up if you talk about thousands and thousands of residents who are processing water, you know, daily by minute in all of our cities and across the planet. So first and foremost, water is a durability issue. If it's leaking, you're causing health issues, mold, and you're paying for that. It's sort of a slap in the face, right? To be paying for leaky water that's causing you health issues. So the green building programs like LEED and Green Star say, look, we need a water leak test. We can't walk away and certify a home that might be leaking water. That's like a bare minimum. Green Communities has points for that. It's not required. And Home Innovations Lab has points for leak detection being installed, which is a fantastic idea. I personally have leak detection installed. But they don't care about, outside of that, they don't have any points or anything for water leak testing as a walk away from a project for certification. And then looking at Energy Star certified clothes washers and dishwashers, which, by the way, Energy Star certified clothes washers and dishwashers give you additional water savings as well. So Enterprise Green requires that, mandatory, hands down. And Green Star basically, you know, gives out has a prescriptive pathway or a performance pathway, which we'll get into. So in the prescriptive pathway, at higher levels, we require it. In the performance pathway, it's optional. And then LEED and Home Innovations Lab give you additional points for having Energy Star certified clothes washers as well. And if you didn't know this, Energy Star certifies appliances and lights and all that. EPA WaterSense certifies flow rates in the same way to ensure that they have low water usage. So LEED, Enterprise Green require WaterSense certification. Well, let me put it this way. Enterprise Green requires WaterSense certification appliance, fixtures and flow rates and toilets, hands down. LEED requires it on the prescriptive pathway when you want points for them, but not performance. Green Star requires it in the same way on the prescriptive pathway, not performance. Home Innovations Lab actually, I think, requires you have certified WaterSense if you want to achieve their gold or emerald status. is the way I believe I'm reading that as it's written, but I could be wrong because sometimes I'm not sure. So, but I think they definitely reference it, and if you want to get to the higher levels. So let's take a look. And you have, you were asking me earlier about having a reference chart. So this is as close as we get to a reference comparison chart. We tried to compare all the flow rates for you in the prescriptive pathways. So these are gallons per flush, and you kind of have your good, better, best, highest, and what is required to achieve these levels. Again, for National Green Building Standard, the way they break their program up is very interesting. They break it up by the amount of units installed. So it actually is, the more bathrooms you put into a home or multifamily building, the more points you can get in NGBS, which I find to be very fascinating. So anyway, in that case, basically you have to hit their gold or emerald status, you have to have all of your toilets at the highest standard 1.5 as well. And so also you should know Enterprise Green does not have a prescriptive pathway, but I put that 0.28 there because it's very difficult to achieve their performance pathway without at least a 1.28 gallon per flush toilet. You can do it, it's just hard. And then the same for showers rated in gallons per minute. Here's sort of your little cheat sheet, so you have that to compare. Starting at good, sort of around the 2 gallons per minute, then the 1.8s, and then the 1.5s. And so again, it's important to know that Green Star is requiring, anytime you see these numbers for Green Star, if you take the prescriptive pathway, you are required to hit this level to be certified silver, 1.5 gold, and then platinum. But you can use performance. And again, for Enterprise, just a reminder, you usually have to be at 2 to achieve their performance level, but that's, that depends on a lot of other things. And the same thing for aerators, at least for the bathroom aerators. Again, just some comparative numbers here for you, and you have that, on hand to reference. Home Innovations Lab is the only entity that gives out prescriptive pathway for actually tackling the sink flow rate. So none of the other programs will give you prescriptive points for that. They give you performance, but not prescriptive points, though we may change that with Green Star here soon enough. And then as far as going, let's go outside for a second. You're kind of looking at, you're kind of pitting, turf grass versus native adaptive drought tolerant and the percentages there. So that's basically the way LEED works, is the more percentage of native adaptive drought tolerant you have versus turf grass, the more prescriptive points you can get in the LEED rating system. NGBS has just this massive a la carte way to make a more sustainable landscaping. Remember what I said at the beginning, lots of choices there. So they give you, if you want your landscape architect to have their head spin, give them the list of things NGBS says and have them pick their favorite couple, and you can grab some points from there. It is very exhaustive on different sustainability ideas. Enterprise Green actually requires that you have all native, adaptive, and drought tolerant plantings. Even the grass itself, you can't really use like Kentucky bluegrass unless you know where it's native. Is it native in Kentucky? I don't really know, but anyway, you have to have that for Enterprise. That's mandatory. And for Green Star, this is all in the performance pathway. So we could care less about outdoor landscape. It needs to be fit into your performance pathway. And then if you're using irrigation, then Enterprise mandates that you have smart water efficient irrigation. They have a whole list on how to achieve that. Whereas again, Home Innovations Lab, give it to your irrigation installer, give them the list. There's a massive a la carte menu of all the ways you can make your irrigation more water efficient. And then for LEED, they have irrigation in the performance pathway, except on single family V4.1, they've moved back to having sort of that a la carte list, similar to National Green Building Standard, of more efficient ways you can do irrigation. So getting into my favorite, the performance pathways, right? So this, we've talked about this, we've went over this, but just as a reminder, if you're doing a project and you are like, so I always use low-income housing, right? The low-income housing developers, they always get scared about the low-flow toilets. They're always nervous. They don't need to be. We know they work. We have glowing reviews, but I understand there's a lot of fear and they don't want to be replacing them. Okay, that's fine. You can use a high-flow toilet and then you have to cut your water use somewhere else and your water performance rating will show you that. Or you've got, on the flip side, you've got your high-end clients, bigger homes. They need 15 shower heads that are flowing at 100 gallons per minute. So again, they love that stuff, right? Okay, what do we do with you then? All right, well, maybe we have low flow toilets. We could do a super drought tolerant thing outside. So that's just, you get to kind of choose and pick where you want to do your water savings. Also, if you're doing innovative ideas, like we'll get into rainwater catchment or gray water or some other ideas, then you want to use these performance pathways. So the way they work is Lead and Enterprise kind of just have this checklist, and Enterprise claims they kind of took the math from Lead. So I guess they're the same. So you just go in and you just input, here's my shower head flow rate. Here's my toilet flow rate. Here's how many units I have. And it out spits some water usage numbers for you that you then get your points from. So that's how Lead and Enterprise works. On the flip side, you have Green Star, which has something called the Home Water Score, which you can use as a standalone rating if you want. And this gives you a 0 through 10 rating of how water efficient your project or unit is based on all the performance features you put in. And you can check it out on our website. There's a link to it. It's in the Green Star program. And you can pick up your points that way, starting at a baseline of 2. We require all of our projects to be at a 2 if they're using the performance pathway. And then the water rating index is a formal program. And we just did a webinar with them. Home Innovations Lab has the water rating index. WRI, it's going to be potentially developed as a standalone, but contact them if you want to learn more. And this is basically a 0 water building all the way up to 100 is a typical home. And then you can use that WRI on new construction only, not existing, to get your water points if you don't want to use their prescriptive pathway. Now for Lead O&M, again, just like energy, you have to submit real water bills every year. And after 3 years, you can show your water reduction compared to the industry standard. And then you can pick up your points and then see what level of LEED certification you can obtain based on your water savings compared to the industry. Living building, on the other hand, requires 50% less water than new, whatever that means, probably using one of these rating tools, and then 30% less on existing than the industry. And then LEED and EGC also require 20% less than baseline using their tools. Finally, instant water. So like these leak detectors that I talked about also can give you instant, like a smart meter, but for water. It gives you instant feedback on how much water you're using. And that's when they send out the leak reports if they notice you're using too much water. So they're usually integrated. So both Home Innovations and Green Star have this water meter feature built in as a viable pathway. So if you're taking the prescriptive path in Green Star at the higher level, you need to have this this water feedback piece. And then if you're going for the net zero water application. And finally, rainwater. LEED allows you to incorporate rainwater first in the sustainable sites category, which we're going to talk about in a second here, for rainwater diversion from the storm system. But then also for water usage, they let you come up with your own calculation that needs to just seem reasonable. So they don't really have a formal way of doing it. Home Innovations Lab has built-in rainwater pathway data, which I think is really cool, in their WRI. And Green Star, we've been working with our friends over at the WERS Builder Green Coalition WERS Index rating to utilize their water source into our program, or we'll even accept a WRI report from Home Innovations Lab as well. But we don't have anything built as of yet. And just so you know, Green Communities has no way to evaluate rainwater savings catchment. For ILFI, it's important to know that you are not allowed to use potable water for irrigation. That is totally unallowed. And then all projects must supply 100% of a project's water needs through captured precipitation or a natural closed loop water system or recycling water project. And the water must be purified without the use of chemicals, AKA chlorine. Not a good thing to drink. I understand why they did it, but it may not be great. No potable water may be used for non-potable uses. And then there's just all these other requirements. You also have to use gray water and rainwater on-site treatment systems for ILFI. And there are some exceptions for low-income projects or projects not legally allowed to do this, because we know this is a legal challenge. And all projects must incorporate resiliency strategies into providing drinking water for at least a week during an outage of access to municipal water usage. So that wraps up the water, and we're going to get into the last section. And just as a heads up, we're probably going to go a little bit over today just so we can finish everything. So stick with us here for the next 20 minutes. But we're going to go a little bit over our time. So just so we can finish, but if you have to get going in the next 20 minutes for the sake of the CEU, you're good to go. But I just wanted to give you a heads up. I can see what's coming up, and there's going to be a little more time than I thought needed here. But that's okay. We're going to stick around just to finish it up, and you can catch the recording if you want to see the rest. So before we move on to the final pillar and then just sort of our conclusion, what other questions do you have for me here in the water section? All right, so moving on to the final pillar, place. And this pillar is important to know that a lot of this is outside of your control, and you're kind of just handed this. But there are some things you can control, and I would challenge you not to feel that it's out of your control. It might require advocacy and political engagement to improve place and a sense of place and connection to the community and betterment for your clients and your tenants, if you will, on your projects. So first, right out of the gate, enterprise green communities. And I want to say this to all of you doing LIHTC projects and going for enterprise, please, please, please survey all of your tenants all the time. And there are some very specific surveys, but enterprise is requiring that you do surveys before you start your construction. They require that you get feedback from your residents, either in the building you're renovating or in another property you own, or from the community, about climate change, about health, about equity. You have to survey them. It's a requirement. And we're coming up with some strategies to help you with that. I get it. And we've got some ideas. But you got to get that survey, and you got to make sure it's incorporated into the design and that you're actually using the residents' feedback to ensure that their voice is heard. Now, LEED AP and LEED have some basic sort of requirements for that, depending on, so for example, like I mentioned, there's a comfort survey that you have to do for residents for LEED AP homes. And then LEED also allows you to do some surveys at the end of the project for some additional innovation points. Also, we've got our preliminary rating, our pre-construction plan review. Enterprise Green Communities requires that you have a full-blown pre-construction plan review completed. I'm talking about running a fine-tooth comb through the plans and through the documentation, through the specifications, picking apart every little single detail. I do this for a day job. I don't just give webinars. And figuring out all the green features. Enterprise, if anything, you're pretty much certifying the project in the design stage. And then at the end, you're just verifying a couple things. I mean, that's it's different than LEED or even Green Star, like where we really care more about the end result. They're like really picking you apart in the design stage, and then you have to submit it to enterprise and they have to approve it, and you can't start construction until it's approved. And I want to, in some ways, I'm saying this to you as if I'm exhausted by that, but I also want to warn you that if you don't do this with the other rating systems, you will find failure. You will find that if you hadn't thought through and gotten ready for these things in the design stage and fixed the issue in the design stage, you're going to have all sorts of problems in the build stage. So the earlier you can get ahead, the better. And so hats off to enterprise for making you do it. I know it's frustrating. I know you're asking me questions like, why is my building manager, who hasn't even been hired yet, having to answer questions in the design stage? But it's got to happen. As far as LEED goes, if you're doing a multifamily building, they have to, and if it's mixed, if it's mid-rise 90.1, they require 90.1 in the ventilation calculations be approved by GBCI. Strongly recommended you do this in design stage, because again, if we find a problem, it's easier to fix it in design. But ultimately, it has to be done before you submit for certification and have those approved. And then as far as Green Star goes, you actually register your project with us by going through the design review process with us. It's not a requirement to do that. It's just an extra way to say your project's registered. It might be required from a tax credit agency, and it ensures that you're headed in the right direction. But we make that optional. And as far as NGBS goes, they completely have no information on preliminary planning. And from what I can tell, doesn't mean it's a good idea though. Taking that a step further, we're talking about design charrettes, getting the team together, getting all the trades, getting all the people wearing the different hats, the HVAC, the solar, the landscape architect, the builder, the architect, the design, the mechanical engineer, getting everyone in the same room, or in this case, these days, the same Zoom call, and getting them together early in the design stage where they can have conversations about innovation and how their roles fit in. This is mandatory, again, for Enterprise Green. For LEED, they have some very strict guidelines on how to do a design shred. It has to be 8 hours, 1 8-hour event before construction documents stage, and or it could be 1 4-hour and another 4-hour, or 1 2-hour and 1 6-hour. But those are extra points for LEED. It's not required. Enterprise requires it. As far as Green Star and NGBS go, we say great idea, but we're not looking at that. And then let's talk about not building in flood zones. We know, again, floods are not obeying their federal standards, their federal regulations. They don't seem to care. With climate change, they're getting worse and worse and worse. So LEED wants to make sure you're not, if you're building in a flood zone, then you have to at least think through some other strategies, local codes. How are you doing that? I mean, we have some projects down on the coast in Florida, and it makes me nervous, but they are following all the recommendations. So fair enough. Enterprise Green Communities has that requirement for new construction, staying away from the 100-year floodplain, the FEMA X zone. And then Green Star has that as a requirement on new construction as well. And NGBS, from what I can tell, doesn't have any reference to that. And then while you're building, we want to make sure you're not polluting the environment and destroying the storm system. So LEED has a component in it it looks at having storm water mitigation, sewer protection. It has the wraps that kind of go around if you've got the netting that goes around, as you can see there on the left picture. If you've got dust being blown around everywhere, you have to use the water systems to push it down. You name it. It's got all of those different features in there that are required to be looked at. Enterprise requires that as well to be validated in the plans anyway. At the very least, we have to check that off in the plans. Green Star has a requirement for that on new construction, and then Home Innovations just has some bonus points for that. So, and then also looking at this, how are we making sure we're not damaging important sites? So wetlands, prime farmland, public parks, green spaces, you name it. And then also, how do we encourage more projects to build on previously developed land? So Home Innovations and LEED give you some bonus points for this. Living Building basically requires that you don't build on new green space and that you avoid some of these, endangered species or wetlands or public parks or prime farmlands. And they're pretty extreme about that in a good way. It's a good thing. It's just, they really limit you on where you can build. And then Enterprise on the new construction side also limits you on building in some of these sensitive site areas. And then rights to nature, wildlife habitats. We just had a project that's about to certify that got certified wildlife backyard from the National Wildlife Foundation. Pretty cool stuff. Gives you a lead innovation point for that. NGBS has several pathways for helping out nature and building so that you're supporting nature. ILFI requires really cool thing that I like here is called the habitat exchange. So basically, if you think about it, for every acre of site you set aside for the building, to some extent, you have to set aside that in perpetuity at a land trust to make sure it's there to help nature. That's kind of, you have to read the exact credit requirements, but that's basically, how it works. And then again, connectivity, right? Building in areas that have more bike lanes, more bus lanes, more community resources, diverse community resources. Encourages the use of getting rid of cars, right? We love electric cars, but they will not save the planet. We need to increase our walkability for our health, for our mental health, and all of that. We know we have to do that. And so LEED has, and Home Innovations have a bunch of points for doing these things. Green Star has some badges and looks at like the walk score. O&M requires you to survey occupants. LEED O&M requires you to survey occupants and try to get a sense for how less cars they're using. And so you can get higher levels of LEED O&M if you can work with your occupants to reduce their reliance on vehicles or personal vehicles. Enterprise Green, depending on whether you're in urban or rural, you have more requirements here on how close you need to be to a bus or bike lane or community resources. And basically, Living Building Challenge is making sure that you have all of these resources in place no matter where you build, unless you're getting set aside for like a farm type development. So, and then density, right? So Enterprise Green on new construction and in urban areas requires you have a certain unit per square foot or acre count. LEED in Home Innovations gives bonus points for density. Enterprise goes so far that they are a Living Building requires that you are not adding more, that you're dense, but that you're also thinking through like, hey, does this community already have too much housing or too much commercial space or too much industrial space? They want you to diversify the space type. So if you're building in a space that has already too much residential, they won't, and to some extent, allow you to build, because that should then be set aside for something more commercial. So we can diversify our use types and don't have one type of use type everywhere. City master planning stuff right there. So, and then we're looking at things like heat island effect, rainwater catchment to stop stormwater issues throughout the life cycle of the house, the project. Living Building requires this. LEED and Home Innovations reward for these points. Enterprise requirement requires that projects that have 5,000 or more square footage of site have to hit the 65th percentile in stormwater mitigation and reduction for that. And a lot of this goes in tandem with heat island. So having white roof, having a reflected or a shaded roof, having catchment, bioswales, you name it. And that's a lot of connection to your water conservation credits as well. Food gardens, very important that we start localizing our food system and moving away from our industrial system. So Green Star has a badge for food gardening. Home Innovations and LEED have some additional points. Enterprise Green requires that you either have a space for food growing, that you have a CSA somewhere nearby that the residents are part of, or can have their own farm stand or gardening somewhere else, or that there's a local farmers market nearby that is sourcing their food locally. So I've actually had to go out and research, farm stores and ask questions like, where's your food coming from and how often around the year? That's how in-depth Enterprise gets. And as far as Living Building goes, they basically make you farm and grow food on your site. That's a component of their program. Very important to have food incorporated into our projects. And then pest management. So there's a lot of different strategies for ensuring we keep pests out of our homes. And so like, here's an example here on the left side, that LEED has, like, you want to keep all plantings 18 inches away from the foundation. That's also a durability issue. We have a pest management badge in Green Star. Home Innovations gives you a bunch of pest management requirements. Enterprise Green Communities and LEED multifamily mandate you have a pest management control plan as part of your policy plan, written up and submitted as well. And speaking of plans, most of all the rating systems, to some extent, require you have operations, policy, maintenance plans in place for your building managers. And or when you go to buy a car, you get a manual on how to operate that car. Like, it still boggles my mind when you go to buy a home, whether it's new or existing, that you're not given a manual on how to operate that home, right? That should just be a code requirement, a bare minimum requirement. But anyway, so these things are required to some extent. Green Star requires it at the gold level. Home Innovation doesn't require it, but you can't certify without doing it. So, LEED requires it. Enterprise is the most robust requirement for operations and maintenance training and manual and tenant training and building manager trainings that we have to verify. And LEED AP O&M V4 has all of these policy requirements, but I guess in V4.1, they're shifting away from policy requirements and going more towards actual tangible results, but they still will have operations and policy management. So, and it also speaks to the fact that, we can build the greenest, healthiest building in the world, but if it's not operated and maintained correctly, what good is that? So that's kind of where these things come in. And then, like I said, celebrating your success. Living Building Challenge basically requires that you celebrate your success and toot your own. I think if you did a living building, you would be shouting about it as much as you could forever. But they have a community educational component. NGBS, again, has this chapter where you're required to do these things around engagement with the community and the attendance. And so you're required to do something. And so part of that requirement may be to put up a sign similar to this LEED sign you see here that showcases this project is a home innovations lab project being constructed. Actually, LEED used to have this as some points, and then they got rid of it. But it's still a cool idea, I think, to put the sign out anyway, even though you don't get a point for it. So, and then electric cars, becoming more and more important. So a lot of times when you install these electric car systems, they also have to have a way to communicate with the grid. So there can be some grid connectivity and interaction there, and also be able to report out usage data. So it's not just installing any old charger, but you got to make sure you read the rules and regulations of each of the things. If you're trying to get our all electric travel badge in Green Star, that's a component there. And then Living Building, I believe, has some requirements for electric car charging stations for households and public. So, yep. And then broadband internet. So this is a requirement for enterprise green communities. Design, build, or retrofit the property to incorporate broadband infrastructure so that when broadband comes to the community, the property can easily be connected. Include a network of mini ducts or conduits throughout the building with expected communication access points to the network termination. You know, you have to include some of these different aspects of that. And then there's some additional points. If the broadband is installed and available for at least 25 megabits per second for downloading, 3 megabits for uploading. And this used to be for rural areas only, but since the pandemic and the fact that we've been going more virtual, they actually changed that so you can get that bonus point now in urban areas too, because there's still people, believe it or not, in urban areas that do not have access to broadband. And that's not right. We need to fix that. So I applaud the green buildings for trying. And to end on a happy note, as far as the pillars go, before we move into some of the other sections and then wrap up, beauty, mental health, well-being, you know, again, the Living Building Challenge, one thing I like about them is they have this beauty requirement. It's very subjective, but having access to views of natural shapes, patterns, lighting. And there's a project in Washington, a school that, like, when it rains, water flows down and you see the water flowing. I wasn't there, but I've seen videos, you know, into the students' area where they're learning, and you hear it, and it's got like that sound that you connect with. It's just amazing. And I don't know how to put it into words or into a certification. ILFI, it's kind of like you know it when you see it. So good luck with that one. But they want you to have a sense of beauty in their program. And I think that's important. You know, we build these boxes. They can be ugly. They can be energy efficient. They can be healthy. But where's that humanity in them? And that's what I really like and appreciate and kind of want to end with as far as the pillars go of what we're doing here. So before we jump into it, again, just a reminder, for those of you who are looking for your continuing education units on demand in the future, not right now, you can grab that on our Thinkific platform or USGBC platform. Take the quiz with an 80% passing rate, and you will get your certificates. For those of you watching this live, you can get your certificate from certs at gutenbergcerts.com. Check over the next couple of days your spam. You'll see it there. And as always, we could never do this without all of our board of directors, our executive director, Jose Reina, all of our volunteers this year who spoke at our courses, our webinars, and all of our sponsors here. They help you achieve these green building certification programs. Mitsubishi Electric with their heat pump systems help you achieve your low energy and healthy scores. Rheem with their heat pump water heater helps remove combustion from the home and gets you higher energy ratings. April Air helps with humidity control and filtration, which you need to check out. We know that dry air helps spread and make COVID worse. And then Build Equinox has smart ventilation systems that use less energy and only ventilate when needed, among all of our other sponsors who, again, they're helping you achieve these green certification programs. So you can check them out on our website, greenhomeinstitute.org. We've got a list of products that will help you build better, and you can just, learn more from there. So we're going to wrap up with a few other non-program related, energy health related, just some of the basic details of these green certification programs. If you have to get going, for those of you watching live, I totally understand that, and you can catch the recording soon to see the other pieces and ask questions there too. For those of you who want to stick around, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up with these ones and then get into some more questions. So education, right? Very big. Resources, tools. Most of our programs that I'm referencing here are moving to the internet and away from hard copy books. LEED does have hard copy books, but they've mostly transitioned away to the internet, to the LEED Credit Library, which is an invaluable tool where you can see all of their credits online. You can interact, you can make comments on how you feel about the credits. And they have a free credit library, but if you want to get all the meat and bones and the detail of LEAD, you have to pay $99 a year to access it, and that's constantly updated all the time. LEAD has free checklists and, again, free access besides the details. Enterprise Green Communities has all of their resources on their website for free. We reference them all the time. They're such amazing resources, and you can use them anytime you want and download them anytime you want. They're such great, and I appreciate the what they put out there from community partners. National Green Building Standard does have a hard copy book that you can order for like $30 the last I saw. And then I tried to download their e-reader book, which is free, but you have to get a special e-reader. I couldn't figure it out, but if you're really good with e-readers, you can probably pick it up, and they make it free, which I appreciate. One thing I will note about National Green Building Standard is that it seems like a lot of the information that you might have questions about seems to be missing from their manual. And that goes for all the programs, right? I mean, you really have to talk to a provider like us or the agency itself to get all the information, because all the manuals still don't have it all. But I would just say NGBS has sort of the least amount of information available. So you need to become friends with one of their verifiers. And then Green Star has all of our resources for free. I'll admit we're at a bit of a transition point with our website, but we will have everything available for free. And the checklist is all free, and you can just use it all as your leisure at any time to help you build a better product, a building. As far as training goes, and accreditation and all that, National Green Building Standard isn't listed here, but the Home Innovation Lab has a certified green professional, CGP, with a CEU maintenance component to it. But it actually has no association with the National Green Building Standard program. It's not like a LEED AP, whereas a LEED AP, if you're a LEED AP, you can get an extra point in the rating system. It's not like that. It's just more about a professional who claims that they're green and is maintaining their credential. So I don't have it listed here because it's actually not associated with the program, but it is available. Enterprise has something called a technical assistance provider. And these are people who, like our organization, who fill out an application every year and offer our services and assistance for helping people certify to Enterprise Green Communities. A lot of architects and engineers have this. And so it's not like a formal training. It's more of like a job application. And they'll list you at that point. But they do a lot of trainings to help you understand the benefits of that every year and why you should become one. Green Star is this is our certified green home program. And so we are using the certified green home program to, obviously ensure that if you want to register a project or work with a rater or an assessor or a builder to certify a project, someone will have to have that associate as well. And then also educating you on how to do these things. And then, like I said, LEED has the AP Homes program, which we do also training and education, and we're launching a training on that. And if you're one of our members, you can get access to some free exam prep online as well to become a LEED AP Homes. And then also all of these programs have third-party raters or assessors. So again, Enterprise Green has the HERS rater that they require, the energy rater, but they actually don't have a green rater. They just have their technical assistance provider, which isn't required. And then Green Star, we reference what we call our green home inspectors. We have several of them that we're training, and it's easier to just work with a green home inspector to come out and evaluate your project. A lot of them come on renovations to do the testing and give you advice. But it's not required to work with a green home inspector. It just makes the project a lot easier. And then LEED and Home Innovations Lab have formal green raters. Home Innovation Lab calls them green verifiers. These are folks that have to go through a formal training, a formal credential, and we do the training for LEED. And actually, the LEED training serves as a credential, serves as a baseline to what Home Innovation wants as an optional pathway. But these are folks who are trained, credentialed. They maintain a relationship and a contract and insurance and ongoing CEU and other things with the agencies, whether they're Home Innovations or USGBC. So they're very formal. And Green Star is getting to that point with our assessors. It's just LEED and Home Innovations has it. They're pretty formal. And then speaking of raters, again, kind of from the least to the most, what we call quality assurance. So how much oversight? And again, this goes back to what your values are. Is it important to use a program that has all of this quality assurance and oversight in place versus one that, may not, but is more affordable to use? And so first, we've got Enterprise Green. They do a lot of desktop review. They require the on-site energy rater, but short of that, they don't have a green rater going out as a third party. And Enterprise Green, to my knowledge, doesn't send out anyone from their agency to do any further quality assurance on any projects. For Green Star, we require, again, that we have that certified, that green home inspector on site as one pathway, who's, as the third party verifying these things on site and then submitting documentation to us, or you as the builder or architect can do it and walk us through the project virtually, and then we visually verify that. Home Innovations Lab actually requires, before you move on, there has to be a pre-drywall or pre-inspection on an existing home approved by Home Innovations Lab. And the verifier has to come on site during pre-drywall. And it has to be approved by the Innovations Lab before the project continues on through construction. So whereas LEED requires an on-site green rater actually do a pre-drywall, they don't require that pre-drywall be approved by the certification agency or provider. But I still list LEED at the top because LEED requires ResNet sampling protocol and HERS rater quality assurance oversight. LEED requires their own quality assurance oversight. So basically, us as providers have to write quality assurance plans. Those get approved, and then we get audited by USGBC. And then we go on to audit one project per year of our green raters. And then our green raters have to be on site during pre-drywall and final. So I would say LEED, out of all the projects, has the most stringent quality assurance, where there's, a provider, a QAD, a green rater on site. And so there's quite a bit of folks involved to ensure the project is done right, and just less so of involvement of these different folks kind of going down this list here. And then finally, cost, right? You're all wondering, well, how much does it cost me to do this? And so I kind of have from the bottom going up, soft cost. Now, hard cost is a whole nother matter. And lately, I am not going to bite on that one with supply shortages, labor shortages, and inflation going through the roof. I am not going to take that bait because I just don't. It's so hyper subjective. You have to make that. I had a team email me the other day. They were looking at a green project. We're doing some consulting. They're like, well, what are the costs to do all these things? We have a limited budget and there's inflation. And I'm like, yep. Go through the green program. I'll answer technical questions. But your builders, your mechanical engineers, your architects, they have to tell you the cost. I am not going to get involved in that. Never. I'll tell you some anecdotal stuff that I see out there, what I hear. I certainly know things, and I see things, and I hear things, and I ask questions because I'm curious. But I am not going to take that bait. So don't even try me on this one. But as far as soft cost goes, certification cost goes, you've kind of have this pyramid, right? And in the bottom of the pyramid, it's a reverse pyramid scheme, right? Thankfully. Now, if it's starting to flip around a little bit and you see that happening, we've seen it happen, let someone know. But you have the rater, right? The on-site rater, the person who's showing up to the project, doing the testing, doing the verification. They're doing all the hard labor as far as the certification goes. They need to be getting paid the most, right? If we see that changing, then we've got a problem. So raters typically, and this is again another one where I get a little concerned about the numbers I give, and it also depends on what country you're in. If you're in like Los Angeles versus middle of the nowhere, Wisconsin, raters typically charge $500 to $1,000 per unit, somewhere around $2,500 to $10,000 per single family home, depending on how big that home gets. And then you start to have asking questions. What are the sampling protocols? How many units need to be tested? ResNet requires 7 + 1 out of 7, or roughly 20 to 30% of the units need to be tested depending on size. So LEED typically references ResNet, but LEED also has a 10% sampling rate for their more active raters as well, so they can reduce that. National Green Building Standard doesn't allow any sampling. All units must be tested. So that's a lot of work. That's a lot of effort. And then, LEED, so let's take a look at some examples here. So LEED, so provider fees, for provider fees, you're looking at maybe $5,000 to $10,000. That's LEED, Enterprise, Green, or Green Star, just for the provider fees. So National Green Building Standard doesn't use a provider, so those fees are eliminated. And then you have your agency fees. And your agency fees are like what goes directly to the organization, like National Green Building Standard or Enterprise Green. For LEED, you're looking at $900 per building for registration, 45 cents per square foot of for certification. And then for single family, it's 225 for registration, 300 for certification. And then there's discounts if you're a LEED, if you're a USGBC member or one of our members. Enterprise Green has a flat, 2 different fees, certification, registration, but it's a flat, I believe, $2,150. NGBS charges $700 per building plus $30 a unit. However, they change that if you have more buildings and more units. They have some discounted fees. And then LEED also has a bunch of discounted fees if you're doing large neighborhood tract homes as well. So in our example here, we have a case study that we kind of did. We look at the cost. Imagine 2 buildings, 100 units, 50 in each, 4 stories at 80,000 square feet. So basically, you're looking at anywhere from $27,000 to $32,000, kind of as you go up this chain here, on just that project alone, as sort of just an example of what fees you can expect to pay on the certification soft cost fees. So that's it for this training. Again, if you're pursuing your certified green home designation and you've attended our other courses live, you can submit those those certificates to me. If you are doing a hybrid, you can submit the live certificates to me from Gutenberg, and then you can pick up our other certificates from our Thinkific channel, and I'll have access to those. You just have to tell me you did it. If you're new to this and you haven't done anything, then what we're putting together in the future is just a full-blown, on our Thinkific platform, you take one of our sessions, you take the quiz, you take the next session, take the quiz, and you can take it in whatever order you like or order you prefer, but you have to get through the 7 basics of residential green building, the comparing energy, and then this, plus a few other items, and you can get into that with us later. And then you'll be an official certified green home associate. And then once you get involved in a real certified green home project, you then would be a certified professional, and then you maintain it that way. So that wraps us up for the, just the designation. As far as comparing green programs, we have lots of trainings and more trainings coming up on LEED. We're going to be doing How to Succeed with LEED series this year. We're about to launch a 4-hour LEED AP training course to go over the basics. We have an Enterprise Green, 2020 webinars we've done. We just did a webinar with National Green Building Standard, and we're doing one on renovations coming up in January. And then we're going to be, once we relaunch our Green Star program, we're going to be doing a full Green Star. So really, this is just sort of your foundational knowledge, but we challenge you to go out, learn more about these rating systems. We'll be doing more education, and pick one or two and start certifying all your projects and get above before the code starts changing. And that way you will be ready for the code changes, IECC 21 and anything else that might be coming.
Be sure to check out all of our courses available online that you can watch anytime and anywhere to pick up your CEUs. Before you go, make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube to get weekly updates and stay up to date on green building science courses, webinars, and home tours. Thanks again.